Hello YouTube. This is Kenzie and I am back here on Frontier sharing with you a project that I have been daydreaming about for a long time. This I am going to be breaking into 2 videos because otherwise it is going to be unbearably long. So this video is going to be the terraforming portion of this build. I am going to be extending the cliffs that my Able Sisters and Nook's Cranny are on to go farther back south and north and wrap around my resident services. And then hidden in the cliffs, I'm going to have my museum. There were a few things that I really wanted to implement in this build, and you'll see me kind of struggle with the placement and how to make it all work in a way that doesn't look weird. But I really want there to be a hidden pathway between 2 cliffs where you could access the sunken area where the museum is from behind resident services without having to climb up and over the cliffs. And I want that path to wind and be a little bit more natural and not just be like a straight line. So that was really fun, and I ended up being really happy with the way it looks. I also wanted my river mouths to connect, and in order to do that, I need the river to go in front of or behind the museum. But I wanted to then have a bridge that would go over the river. That way it's more accessible. And I also want to have a backwards incline because I've never implemented one of those on my island, and I've kind of been loving them whenever I see other people using them on their islands. So you'll see me kind of play with the placement of that a lot throughout this video. I end up being really happy with the way everything turned out, so I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like using diagonal bridges? Do you like using backwards inclines on your island? Is terraforming something that you look forward to? Do you think about it a lot before you start terraforming? Or do you just kind of dive in and let whatever will happen? I want to kind of know what your guys' thoughts are and how you have your plan of attack for your island. And here you can see that I am starting to create the pathway that you would take from resident services to go back to the museum. And of course, you always gotta struggle to pop your balloons to get a DIY recipe that you already have. Very important. I end up leaving a small area to the right of my resident services on the first level. I may expand the little pond that is by my Nook's Cranny and Able Sisters to go over farther back, or I might have a larger sitting area, maybe a tiny little cafe. Not entirely sure yet. I play with the idea of leaving the area that I'm currently terraforming as an additional sunken area, but I end up deciding to fill it in. That was a little too busy for me. I thought about maybe having a secondary path to my museum on this side of my resident services, but it wasn't really working for me with the placement of the lamppost and the little bulletin board thingy. It just didn't really work for me, so I ended up deciding to fill this in as well. And the section of cliff that is more to the left is the one that I decide to have an incline for because it's not really going to be connected to anything else. So without an incline, it's not going to be accessible. I wanted my villagers to be able to go up there. That way I could stalk them and take cute pictures of them doing whatever they do. And here on my map, you can see my river mouth, which is more on the right, and then the section of river that I need to make it connect. And I'm kind of trying to figure out how far back I want my museum to be, how I want the river to connect, how I want the cliffs to look, where is the placement of the incline and the bridge going to be. Ends up being something that I look at quite often. I do edit out some of the time that I spend looking at my map because that is not entertaining for you guys to look at at all. So you won't have to look at my map quite as often as I looked at my map. I do end up going back and rounding out all the corners, of course. I just have noticed that I always used to round the corners out as I would go, and then I would go back and make the cliffs larger. So I ended up making double the work for myself, and I've been trying to break myself of that habit and make sure that I'm actually happy with the size of the cliff before I round out my corners. And I found that my terraforming hasn't taken quite as long as it is in the past. Now this video, before I edited everything out and did speed it up, it was 2 hours worth of footage. So while it was faster, not by much, of course. I definitely want to make sure that I'm being transparent on how long it took me to create this. I feel like sometimes when you look at YouTube videos or photos that people put on Instagram or Twitter, sometimes it's hard to not compare yourself to others, and particularly with YouTube videos when everything is always sped up. Sometimes it's easy to think that other people are just, doing terraforming really easily and really quickly, and that is definitely not what this was. Here I kind of play with how my river looks right here, trying to decide how to make it wind. Do I want to make it go up and over the cliff that I have on that one side? Do I want to make it kind of weave around the cliff? I also play with the idea of connecting the cliff that I'm currently building to the cliff that is along the back of my island that you can kind of see right there where I've got my little DIY station. I'm still not 100% sure whether or not I want it to be connected. The nice thing about having it connected is that then I could easily access this cliff to the cliff that is further north on the island. And accessibility is really important to me on my island. I want it to be easily walkable. I want you to be able to navigate it really nicely. I don't want it to be complicated. I don't want anybody to get lost. So I end up leaving them not connected because then you could follow the other little path from the sunken area where my museum is to the first level cliffs that are going to be farther west on my island, so to the left. And I think that is where I'm going to put my farm. That's where my farm was previously. My farm was quite large. It also just really wasn't bringing me a lot of joy, and I wanted to redo it in a smaller scale with everything not being quite as perfect. Everything was very symmetrical. Things were in rows. It just wasn't really resonating with me anymore. So that's why I decided to tear it down and make room for this new museum build that I was excited for. So now I'm starting to box in where I'm thinking the sunken portion is going to be. And now I decide to round out my corners for the walkway that you would take in between the cliffs to get to the museum. this point I go and I round out most of my corners. I end up forgetting a couple that I get to later here. And we've got Marty doing his fun little zoomies. You know, not in the way at all. And here is where I start to think, you know, do I want this area to be open on the first level? Do I build up more cliff here? And this is when I finally pull the trigger and decide to fill it in with cliff. And I think I'm going to be moving my Able sisters farther up over this area that I'm currently terraforming, because right now my Able sisters and my Nooks Cranny are kind of smushed together in the front of my island. I purposely put them kind of close together. I am forever afraid of running out of stuff in Animal Crossing. It's my biggest stressor. I'm worried about running out of storage. I'm worried about running out of materials for crafting. I'm worried about running out of space on my island to decorate. So whenever I would do a build, I would always do the smallest little areas because I was so worried that later I would not have space to do something else. So I am trying to break myself of that fear, because at the end of the day, this is just a video game. Nothing is permanent. If I end up deciding that I don't like something, I can tear it down. I can start over. It's not the end of the world. So I am going to be moving Able sisters farther back and giving them a little bit more space so that I can decorate the exterior. Maybe have a little, you know, relaxing place for like a little sitting area, you know, like some sewing machines and different sewing materials. I do try to make these two cliffs that create the pathway back to the museum close enough together in some places that I could hop between one and the other, just for convenience. I am super lazy and I like to be able to conveniently navigate my island, so I try to make sure that there are some areas that I can do that, but I do still add the incline, that way my villagers can get up there. Now we have to go and talk to Thomas and see about getting the kit to move the museum. Here you can see me trying to decide where I want my museum to be placed. I do like to imagine the spot several times. I wish that you could imagine a location for a building or a bridge or an incline and then walk around it quickly, because sometimes I like seeing, you know, how close is this to the cliff on the side, or how close is this to the bridge. I do use this purple flower custom design to just kind of imagine the tiles for the placing of my museum. That way I can kind of, in a makeshift way, see how close it is to the, you know, the surrounding cliffs, so, and also where I'm thinking I'm going to put my bridge. That custom design is actually my own, and I can include my creator ID in the description of the video. That way, if you'd like to include it on your island, you can. I have also made a bright hot pink version of the flower And I have a 4-tile version of the flower as well if you'd like a larger purple or pink flower. Now I start to work on the placement for the diagonal bridge. This is my first time attempting a diagonal bridge, so I play with the spacing of the river a couple of times before I end up making the river wide enough for the bridge to be placed. And then once I know that I have the river placed in such a way that it is wide enough for a bridge to go there, I work on connecting the water under the bridge to the water on either sides, so that way my river mouths can connect. I know a lot of people don't care too much if their river mouths do connect. For some reason that was really important to me in this build, that I find a way to make them connect. They've pretty much been connected the entire time I've had my island, and I really haven't terraformed too much in this area where I decide to put my museum until today. This is really my first time playing with this area. I ended up moving the museum over a little bit. I did figure out that Thomas will allow us to move a building and place a bridge on the same day, so he's definitely going the extra mile for us there. I normally use the suspension bridge, but here I decided that the wooden bridge would be kind of a fun way to mix it up a little bit but not go too far out of my comfort zone, because the wooden bridges and the ones that feel a little bit more like something you would see on a deserted island or a island that hasn't been like super developed, it still is kind of wild. That's kind of the vibe that I wanted this to have. So now I'm working on connecting this water to the river on either side. That way I can play with the river and the placement of the museum and see if I'm told by the game that the building is too close to the water. I'm also mapping out where I want my backwards incline to go. I'm trying to make sure that the walkway from the incline to the bridge is not too unnatural. And here I can see that I actually mapped this out a little bit too wide, so I get to shave that off a little bit and then make my river a little bit more wide and a little bit closer to the museum. And then I can make this area near the incline go out a little bit more. That way the walkway from the incline to the bridge is not so tight. Here we're just trying to make sure that the river is not 100% straight. We want it to kind of get, you know, wider in some areas and then get a little bit more wispy and teeny in other areas. And here we finally pull the trigger. Oh, I lied. Just kidding. We don't do that yet. We double check the bridge first and then we pull the trigger. I was also worried that I was going to place the museum and then the game was going to be like, oh, no, can't place a bridge there. Too close. So I do the bridge first and then the museum. You know what would be a really fun quality of life update for Animal Crossing? Mobile banking. We have it in real life. Why can't we access the ABD from our Nook phone? Let me know what you guys think. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we'll never be happy. We always have new quality of life updates that we would like Nintendo to get for us. But that is one that I feel like would be super, super convenient. I don't know that I've really ever heard anybody mention that they think that would be a good update. And at this point, we have time traveled to a new day. That is why we can see that I actually have the bridge in the museum fully placed, and that's why we're able to place an incline. Thomas will not allow us to do a bridge, incline, and relocate a building all in one day. That is asking too much. And I'm gonna go and kind of fine tune some of my terraforming areas. There are some areas where I've accidentally undone some of my waterscaping. And then a couple of cliffs that I've got to round out. I decide that I do want these areas to be disconnected. That way you can walk from the museum area to my little farm, which is what I'm pretty sure is going to be over on the other side of these cliffs. And then I didn't actually connect my river mouths yet, so I do that here. And everything is flowing. I do kind of tweak the placement of the land here. That way it's not perfectly straight, to make stuff wind a little bit, feel a little bit more like an actual island. And after this, we are done with the terraforming. I am gonna kind of live with it for a few days before I do the rest of the decorating, placing the trees, the flowers, the shrubs, all of the furniture, the custom design codes. I want to make sure that I really like the placement of the land first. I decide that this area near my picnic spot is just too straight for the second level of cliff, so I add a couple of little curves there. That way it feels more natural again. Now I'm just double checking to see if there is anywhere that I need to correct. Seeing what it looks like from this side. Fixing my waterscaping here because I end up having the river connect a little bit farther down. But I've got to climb to the first level to see exactly where that spot is before I can add it, because I can't quite see it from the second level. And after I finish connecting the river on this side, I'm going to double check that I remembered to connect it completely on the other side and do my final walkthrough. And that is the completion of the terraforming portion of this build. I want to thank you all so much for sticking around and watching this video. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.